Silas and I were, by all outside accounts, a success story. We met in our early 20s, married at 26, and bought a modest but lovely house in a quiet suburban neighborhood by 28. He was the bedrock of our life. A brilliant software architect, Silas was steady, predictable, and profoundly kind. He built a world for us that was secure and comfortable, a world where the bills were always paid on time and the future felt like a straight, well-paved road. The problem with a well-paved road, however, is that after a while, you stop noticing the scenery. The first few years were a blur of newlywed bliss and shared ambitions. But as Silas climbed the corporate ladder, the rungs took him further and further away from me. His job became more demanding, the hours longer. He'd come home, his mind still tangled in lines of code, and give me a perfunctory kiss on the cheek. We'd eat dinner, our conversation orbiting the safe, sterile topics of his work stress and my mundane office gossip. Then, like clockwork, he'd retreat into his office, the glow of his dual monitors casting a blue, alien light under the door. The clicks of his keyboard or the distant sounds of explosions from his video games became the soundtrack to my evenings. I started to feel less like a wife, and more like a high-end roommate. The silence in the house grew cavernous. It wasn't a peaceful silence. It was a heavy, suffocating one, filled with all the things we weren't saying. I was lonely. Not just alone, but profoundly lonely, the kind of loneliness you can only feel when you're sitting right next to someone. That's when the ghost appeared. A notification on my laptop one Tuesday evening, a name I hadn't seen in years. Ronan. Ronan was my college boyfriend, the one before Silas. He was the passionate, artistic antithesis to Silas's quiet stability. We had a fiery, tumultuous relationship that burned out as quickly as it had ignited. Seeing his name pop up felt like a jolt from a different lifetime. "Hey stranger, just saw an old photo and thought of you, hope life's treating you well." It was innocuous, harmless. I could have ignored it. I should have ignored it. But in the deafening silence of my house, his message felt like a shout. I typed back a polite, generic reply. But that one message was like turning a key in a lock I didn't know still existed. The conversations that followed were casual at first, reminiscing about old professors and mutual friends. But they quickly became something more. He was a spark in the gray monotony of my life, a reminder of a girl I used to be spontaneous, desired, alive. And I, like a moth drawn to a flame, couldn't bring myself to fly away. What started as online messages soon bled into the real world. A week into our renewed contact, Ronan suggested coffee. "Just to catch up properly," he'd texted. "I'm sure you're busy, but it would be great to see you." My heart hammered against my ribs. It was wrong. I knew it was wrong. But the temptation was overwhelming. I told Silas I was meeting my friend Tara from work for an extended lunch. The lie slipped out so easily it scared me. Seeing him was intoxicating. He looked even better than I remembered. He'd kept his lean, athletic build, and his smile still had that same confident, slightly mischievous edge that used to make my knees weak. But it wasn't just his looks. It was the way he looked at me. His focus was total. He remembered that I took my coffee with oat milk and 1 raw sugar, a detail Silas had long since forgotten. He asked about my dreams, my passions, the things I wanted to do with my life beyond the insurance office questions Silas hadn't asked in years. That one coffee turned into regular lunches. Our secret garden. I found myself dressing up for work, a little thrill running through me at the thought that he would notice my new blouse or the way I'd done my hair. And he always did. "You look incredible, Corinne," he'd say. And the validation was like a drug. Meanwhile, Silas remained oblivious. One evening, after a particularly wonderful lunch with Ronan, I came home feeling vibrant and alive. I'd gotten a new haircut on a whim. I walked into the kitchen where Silas was typing on his laptop. "Hey, what do you think?" I asked, spinning around. He glanced up, his eyes unfocused for a second before registering me. "Oh. Hey. Looks good. Tough day?" And just like that, he was back to his screen. The moment gone. My vibrant bubble popped, leaving a bitter residue of disappointment. It was in that stark contrast that the seeds of resentment began to sprout. Silas provided a house, but Ronan was building me a sanctuary, albeit one founded on lies. My phone became an extension of him, a secret portal to a world where I was witty and desired. I'd find myself smiling at a text while making dinner, then quickly composing my face when Silas walked into the room. The guilt was a constant low-grade hum beneath the surface, but the exhilaration was louder. I told myself it was harmless, we weren't sleeping together. It was just an emotional connection, a friendship. But I knew, deep down, that the secrets we were keeping were a betrayal just as profound as any physical act. I was tending to a garden that was slowly poisoning the roots of my own home. The line I'd been so carefully towing was about to be obliterated. It happened the week Silas had to fly to Chicago for a 3-day cybersecurity conference. The moment his car pulled out of the driveway, the house felt enormous and oppressively empty. For the first 2 days, I reveled in the solitude, but by the third night, the loneliness was a physical ache. I was texting with Ronan, complaining about my boredom. I could bring over a bottle of wine, he offered. We could order some food. Just hang out, no pressure. My logical brain screamed every possible warning. This was different. This wasn't a neutral cafe. This was my home. Our home. But my heart, starved and reckless, leaped at the suggestion. Okay, I typed back, my fingers trembling slightly. But you have to be gone before midnight. He arrived with a bottle of expensive red wine and a smile that melted my resolve. We put on music, the kind Silas always called depressing indie trash, and talked for hours. We sat on the couch, and as the night wore on and the wine flowed, the space between us shrank until our knees were touching. He told me he'd never really gotten over me, that breaking up had been the biggest regret of his life. I soaked it all in, every word a balm on my wounded ego. Nothing physical happened, not in the way people usually mean. But the air between us was thick with unspoken intention. When he stood to leave, long after midnight, he pulled me into a hug. It wasn't a friendly hug. It was long and close, and I could feel the heat of his body through my shirt. When we pulled away, his eyes were dark with an emotion I recognized all too well. As he stood by the door, a wild, self-destructive impulse seized me. I walked to the small dish by the entrance where we kept our spare keys. My hand closed around the cold, familiar metal of the house key. Here, I said, my voice barely a whisper, as I pressed it into his palm, in case, you want to drop by again sometime. He looked down at the key, then back up at me. He didn't say anything. He didn't have to. The look we exchanged was a contract, a silent, binding agreement that we had just crossed a threshold from which there was no turning back. I had just given another man the key to the life I had built with my husband. After that night, something inside me shifted. The guilt was still there, but it was now tangled with a strange, reckless sense of power. I had a secret that was all my own, and in a bizarre way, it made me feel bold. I started testing the limits, almost as if, on some subconscious level, I wanted to get caught. I began mentioning Ronan casually, in conversations with Silas, just to watch his reaction. Oh, Ronan saw that movie last week. He said it was incredible, I'd say over dinner. The first time, Silas barely reacted. The second time, I saw his jaw tighten. He knew who Ronan was, my ex, his old college acquaintance. He never liked him, said he was all style and no substance. You're talking to him again? Silas asked one evening, his tone carefully neutral. Yeah, we just reconnected online. He's just a friend, I said, the lie tasting more familiar each time I uttered it. But Silas wasn't a fool. He began to notice the small things, the way I angled my phone away from him, my frequent, late nights at the office. The tension in our house became a palpable thing, a third presence at the dinner table. The inevitable confrontation came on a Sunday night. I had mentioned Ronan for the third time that day. Silas put down his fork and looked at me, his eyes dark with a pain that I had willfully ignored for too long. What's going on, Corinne? He asked, his voice controlled but firm. What's really going on with you and Ronan? My defense mechanisms fired up immediately. What are you talking about? Are you spying on me now? Checking my phone? That's really great, Silas. Real trusting. I don't need to check your phone, he said, his voice rising slightly. I have eyes. I see how you hide your screen when I walk into a room. I see that you've been different, distant. Maybe I'm distant because you're never here. I shot back, turning it around on him, making his absence the villain instead of my betrayal. Ronan is just a friend who actually talks to me about things other than computer viruses. Maybe you should try it sometime. Oh. The argument ended in a stalemate, with me storming off to the bedroom. But I had planted a seed of doubt that I knew would grow. The next morning, while I was in the shower, Silas did the one thing I had been both dreading and daring him to do. He looked at my phone. When I came out of the bathroom, wrapped in a towel, He was sitting on the edge of the bed, my phone in his hand. His face was ashen, devastated. Can't stop thinking about last night. I miss your touch, he read, his voice earfed to him for emergencies. I lied, the word tasting like ash. What emergency? Silas countered, the hurt in his voice giving way to a cold, hard anger. Would your ex-boyfriend possibly need to handle at our house? He stood up, his stature seeming to fill the entire room. I want the key back, Corinne. Today. And I want whatever this is to stop. Now. Or we're done. The word done hung in the air, a threat so final it stole my breath. I wasn't ready for that. I loved the stability Silas gave me, even if I craved the excitement Ronan offered. So I crumpled. I cried. I promised to end it, to get the key back, to work on us. And Silas, my good, trusting Silas, wanted to believe me so badly that he did. Or at least, he pretended to. My promise to Silas was a lie of omission. I did text Ronan, telling him we needed to cool things down for a while, because Silas was being insecure. I never said it was over. I just framed it as an obstacle we needed to be more careful to navigate. The door was left wide open. To avoid suspicion, I bought a cheap, prepaid phone, a burner phone, and kept it in my desk drawer at work. The deceit had now reached a new level of premeditation. For the next month, Silas genuinely tried. He started coming home from work earlier. He planned a weekend trip to the coast for us, a place we hadn't visited since our honeymoon. He even suggested we see a couples therapist. His efforts, born of a desperate hope to save our marriage, only made me feel more suffocated. Every kind gesture felt like a reproach, every attempt at connection, a reminder of my betrayal. His goodness made my deception feel even uglier, and in a twisted way, it made me resent him for it. The texts between Ronan and me never really stopped. They just moved to the burner phone. The thrill was now mixed with a constant, humming anxiety. The breaking point, the moment of detonation, arrived on an unremarkable Tuesday. Silas called me around 2 p.m. Hey, good news. My big project got pushed, so I'm going to be able to leave early. I was thinking I'd pick up some fresh pasta and we could cook dinner together tonight. Panic shot through me, cold and sharp. I had already invited Ronan to come by after work, assuming Silas would be late as usual. My mind raced, spinning a new lie out of thin air. Oh, honey, that's so sweet, but I can't tonight, I said, faking disappointment. We just got a huge new claim filed, and my boss wants me to stay late to get the paperwork started. I'll probably be here until at least 8. Oh, okay, well, another time then, he said, the disappointment in his voice palpable. The guilt was a physical sting, but it was quickly overshadowed by relief. Then, as if scripted by a cruel playwright, my fate was sealed. An hour later, Silas texted me, "You're not going to believe this. The client rescheduled. Meeting is back on for tonight. Looks like I'm the one working late after all. Don't wait up." A giddy, triumphant rush washed over me. It felt like the universe was giving me permission. I immediately texted Ronan on the burner phone. "Change of plans. We're back on. See you after 6. Ronan came over around 6:30. We opened a bottle of wine, ordered Thai takeout, and settled onto the couch to watch a movie neither of us paid any attention to. His arm was draped around my shoulders, and my head was resting against his chest. It felt comfortable, natural, and so incredibly, catastrophically wrong. We were playing house in a home that wasn't ours to share. And then I heard it. The sound that turned my blood to ice. The low rumble of the garage door opening. We both froze. Time seemed to warp, stretching and slowing as we scrambled apart, the spell broken. I looked at the coffee table, the takeout containers, the 2 half-empty wine glasses. It was a scene of casual intimacy, impossible to explain away. Silas walked in through the connecting door from the garage. He stopped dead in the entryway, his briefcase still in his hand. I watched his face cycle through a lifetime of emotions in about 3 seconds. First, confusion, why was I home? Then realization as his eyes landed on Ronan. And finally, a look of absolute, soul-crushing devastation that will be burned into my memory for the rest of my life. His voice, when he finally spoke, was deadly quiet. "What is this?" "We were just watching a movie," I said, my own voice a pathetic, weak squeak. "Look, man, it's not what it looks like," Ronan mumbled, using the most damning cliché in the book. "It looks like you're getting cozy with my wife, in my living room, while I'm supposed to be at work," Silas replied, his calm more frightening than any shout. Desperate to seize control of a situation that was spiraling into oblivion, I jumped in, my voice sharp with a defensive anger that was born of pure panic. Nathan, you are completely overreacting. Ronan and I are just friends. We're allowed to hang out. Friends, he repeated, the word hollow and lifeless. Friends don't sit like that, Corinne. And that's when I said it, the words that served as the final fatal blow, the sentence that ended everything. I can invite whoever I want over, I snapped. It's my house too. The moment the words were out, I knew I had made a catastrophic mistake. The hurt on Silas's face hardened into something else, something cold and final. The last bit of warmth he had for me died in that instant. Silas just stared at me for what felt like an eternity, the silence in the room so heavy I could barely breathe. Then he slowly turned his gaze to Ronan, who looked like he wanted the floor to swallow him whole. I think you should leave, Silas said, his voice unnervingly steady. Ronan didn't need to be told twice. He grabbed his jacket from the back of the chair and practically fled, throwing me a fleeting, apologetic glance that did nothing to quell the terror rising in my chest. He was escaping, leaving me to face the wreckage I had created. When the front door clicked shut, Silas finally turned his full attention back to me. So this is what our marriage means to you, he said, his voice flat, devoid of emotion. This is the respect you have for me. For us. You're blowing this way out of proportion, I insisted, my last, desperate attempt at deflection. Nothing even happened. Nothing happened? He scoffed, a bitter, humorless sound. Something has been happening for months, Corinne. You have been lying to my face, day after day, while I've been breaking my back trying to save us. Don't you dare stand there and tell me nothing happened. If you weren't so controlling about who I can be friends with. Stop! His voice cut through my excuses like a blade. This isn't about friendship, this is about you and him. Are you in love with him? The question hung in the air, a direct hit. I froze, unable to form an answer. My silence was the only answer he needed. His voice cracked slightly, the first sign of the raw pain beneath his composure. Do you love me at all anymore? Of course I love you, I said automatically. The words sounding hollow even to my own ears. But you love him too, he stated. It wasn't a question. Again, I didn't respond. And again, my silence told him everything. I can't do this anymore, Corinne, he said finally, his shoulders slumping in defeat. I'm done. Now is crude. You can't just throw away 6 years of marriage because you're jealous. I cried, grasping at straws. This isn't about jealousy, he said, looking at me as if for the first time. This is about trust and respect, both of which are gone. He finally walked further into the room and sank onto the couch, the same couch where I had been with Ronan moments before, and put his head in his hands. I'll cut him off completely, I bargained, the words tumbling out in a frantic rush. I'll block his number, delete him, whatever you want. He looked up, and his eyes were filled with a weary sadness. That's the problem, don't you see? It would be what I want, not what you want. You'd resent me for it, and we'd just end up right back here in a year. I can't live like that. He stood up and walked to the window, staring out into the dark street. I think you should leave, Corinne, for tonight. What? You're kicking me out of my own house? I was incredulous. Our house, he corrected me, his voice hardening again. And yes, I think you should go. Stay with Tara, stay with your parents, stay with him for all I care, but I can't look at you right now. I stormed upstairs, fueled by a self-righteous fury, and threw some clothes into an overnight bag. When I came back down, he was still standing by the window, his back to me. He didn't turn around as I grabbed my purse and keys and walked out the door, closing it softly behind me. I drove straight to Ronan's apartment, my mind a chaotic swirl of anger and a strange, illicit thrill. This was it, the moment of truth. The end of my suffocating marriage, and the beginning of my passionate new life with the man who truly saw me. I knocked on his door, tears of turmoil and anticipation streaming down my face. When he opened it, he looked surprised, and more than a little uncomfortable. Corinne? What happened? He asked, not immediately inviting me in. Silas kicked me out, I said, my voice cracking. He came home. He saw us. He ended it. I waited for him to pull me into his arms, to tell me everything would be okay. Instead, his expression shifted from surprise to something like weary resignation. He ran a hand through his hair. And, you came here? Can I stay? I asked, pushing past him into the apartment. Just for tonight, just until I figure things out. Yeah, of course, he said, though his tone was anything but enthusiastic. You can take the bed. I'll sleep on the couch. That wasn't the response I'd imagined. In my fantasy, this moment was supposed to be romantic, the culmination of months of stolen glances and secret texts. Instead, it felt awkward and clinical. I thought you'd be happy about this, I said, unable to hide the hurt in my voice. He sighed, finally looking me in the eye. Corinne, I like you. A lot, you know that, but I didn't think it would happen like this. I didn't think you'd actually leave him. The floor dropped out from under me. What are you saying? Just having fun? All those messages, all the lunches, telling me how much you missed me? That was just a game to you? It wasn't a game, he insisted, holding his hands up defensively. But there's a big difference between flirting with a married woman and having her show up on your doorstep expecting to move in. I never asked you to blow up your marriage for me. There. I sank onto his cold leather couch, the reality of my situation crashing down on me with the force of a physical blow. I had burned my entire life to the ground for a fantasy, and the man I had built that fantasy around was now looking at me like I was a problem he needed to solve. I had never in my entire life felt so completely and utterly alone. The next few months were a blur of humiliation and harsh realities. I spent a week in a sterile motel room before finding a tiny, overpriced one-bedroom apartment I could barely afford on my meager salary. Without Silas's income, I was suddenly drowning in financial anxieties I hadn't had to consider for years. Our joint accounts were frozen, and I had to drain my personal savings just to pay the security deposit and first month's rent. Silas and I communicated only through brief, sterile text messages to arrange times for me to retrieve my belongings from the house. I would go over when I knew he was at work, walking through the silent rooms of my former life like a ghost, packing my past into cardboard boxes. Each object a wedding photo, a souvenir from a vacation, the stupid mug I bought him that said "World's Okayest Husband" was a fresh stab of regret. Ronan, predictably, had vanished. After that first night, he became distant, his texts infrequent, until they stopped altogether. My pride, what little I had left, kept me from chasing him. I had already made a big enough fool of myself. About 4 months after I moved out, I reached out to Silas and asked if he would meet me for coffee. To my surprise, he agreed. We met at a neutral cafe halfway between his work and my new apartment. He looked good, better than he had in years. He looked rested, leaner, and the perpetual stress that had lined his brow was gone. Silas, I started, my voice trembling. I wanted to say I'm sorry. For everything. For Ronan, for the lies, for disrespecting you and our marriage in the worst possible way. He nodded slowly, his expression unreadable as he stirred his coffee. I appreciate that, Corinne. I made a huge, unforgivable mistake. I continued, the confession pouring out of me. I threw away the best thing in my life for a stupid fantasy that wasn't even real. He finally looked up, his eyes meeting mine. What happened with him? I let out a bitter laugh. Nothing. The second I was actually available, he couldn't get rid of me fast enough. He wanted the thrill of the affair, not the reality of a relationship. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for the inevitable rejection. Is there any chance at all that we could try again? I know I don't deserve it, but I still love you. The look he gave me wasn't angry. It was filled with a deep, profound pity, which was somehow worse. I think you love the idea of me, Corinne, he said gently. You love the stability, the comfort, the life we had, but if you really loved me, the person, you wouldn't have needed to look for what you needed somewhere else. You would have come to me. He was right. I couldn't argue with his logic. People make mistakes, I whispered. They do, he agreed. And sometimes, those mistakes have permanent consequences. I can forgive you. I truly can. But I can't forget. I can't go back to living in a house where I'm always wondering, always second-guessing. I can't unknow what I know now. The divorce was finalized 3 months later. I learned through the grapevine that Silas had taken a major promotion that required him to relocate to Seattle. And just like that, he was gone. 6 years of marriage evaporated into a box of photos I kept in the back of my closet. About a year after the implosion, Tara, my friend from work who had tried to warn me, showed me a photo on her phone. It was a social media announcement. Silas, standing on a mountain with a radiant-looking woman, an engagement ring sparkling on her finger. The caption said she was a software engineer he'd met in Seattle. Looking at his genuine, unburdened smile, I felt a complicated mix of emotions. A sharp pang of loss for what I had thrown away, but also, surprisingly, a quiet, sincere hope that he had found the happiness he so richly deserved. 2 nights ago, my phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. "Hey stranger. Just saw an old photo and thought of you. Hope life's treating you well." The exact same line, the same bait, the same ghost. This time I didn't hesitate. I didn't feel a thrill. I just felt tired. I blocked the number without responding. I'm still figuring things out, still learning how to sit with the crushing weight of my choices without letting them define me completely. My life isn't exciting or passionate. It's quiet, it's lonely. But for the first time in a very long time, it's honest. It's not much, but it's a start.